So as you mentioned earlier, states can't legally go bankrupt, and you mentioned there might be bailouts. As we know, politicians have a very short timeline. There's a kind of hot potato game going on. But what is the ethical dilemma that may occur if the U.S. government starts to bail out states, and states see that as kind of a justification to continue that process of kind of financial hot potato down the line?
Right. I mean, once it's on the table that a bailout is going to occur, states, other states that are not part of that first round bailout will conclude, we also could be part of this. And that would presumably be an argument that the opponents of such a bailout would marshal in order to argue against the bailout from happening. I think you're right, and I think that hopefully what one would hope one would see happen if this, if it came to a bailout, that it would be made clear that the bailout would be conditional on a number of other provisions that states would have to undertake in order to clean up their finances. That would be the hope. I'm not sure I even place much hope in that, because there's another thing going on in parallel to this. There's kind of a canary in the coal mine, a smaller segment that Congress is actually grappling with right now. A lot of unions, private sector unions, have these types of pension arrangements. There are 10 million people who are in these things, and they are also broke. And they have gone to Congress and asked for a bailout. And the unfunded liabilities there are not $4 trillion, but they are about $700 billion. And Congress seems to be basically just lying down and giving them an unconditional bailout. So it doesn't look good, but if you want to ask what's the policy measure that one could undertake in the hopes of not having that conclusion be drawn by those that are not in the bailout, you'd have to have some real provisions to kind of improve your finances if you wanted to be eligible for the bailout money. Yeah.
Thank you. So my question is, you said you've been doing this research for a long time, and for most of it, it seems, based off what you said, that it was being ignored, and there hasn't been a lot of change besides the recent federal change in monetary policy. What would, like the Fed or, the Fed changing its rate for what the state and local governments owe, what effect would that actually have in principle?
So just to be clear, it wasn't a change in monetary policy. It was just a change in, the Fed just tabulates a bunch of statistics. Just their statisticians sort of woke up and agreed that, that we've been right for a long time about this. But what what kind of change could that affect? Well, it does now mean that there are now, multiple sets of books out there in some ways, right? So there are, and I mean, these were numbers that I'd been providing as well for a long time, but now that a federal government entity is providing them as well, that kind of adds a little bit more heft to those other sets of numbers. And so it means that state and local governments will have to do more explaining as to why their numbers are different from the federally aggregated numbers. There's a bill that's been put forward in Congress. It actually gets reintroduced every Congress, called the Public Employee Pension Transparency Act. I like this legislation because it cites my research, and it just says that state and local governments should have to disclose their unfunded pension liabilities using our methodology, and no more than that, just that they should have to disclose it. And the idea is that if they disclosed it, they wouldn't be able to keep this kind of these kind of two sets of books where we're saying, well, we prefer using this set of books even though we have to disclose under these measures. And that would then lead to some pressure, hopefully, to some of these start paying or stop promising reforms. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I'm curious whether you've seen that, especially in cities that have gone bankrupt, whether people that purchase the city bonds have put pressure on governments to be more transparent in their accounting policies. And then also, second question, I was really interested by the fact that these pension obligations are very hard to negotiate and restructure. Has there ever been a situation where a city or a state has successfully been able to kind of reduce the amount that they owe?
Only in bankruptcy or other types of financial distress. There have been cases where, again, they've been able to play with these cost of living adjustments. Where, as I mentioned, the 100,000 in my example, that's just the first year. Typically these things have an inflation component to them, and they've been able to renegotiate that piece of it. So small incremental things. Larger stuff has been struck down by state courts, and in bankruptcy has been viewed as being just not feasible, because who are you going to default on? Like the nameless, faceless creditor over here, the chief of the police who's saying, I want to be able to tell my members to get back out there and maintain public safety. So I think there's very little wiggle room there. On your first question about pressure from the municipal bondholders, you're not going to believe this, but in fact, the municipal bond sales lobby is one of the major opponents of transparent accounting here. Because basically, municipal bonds tend to be owned by households. And the reason is that there is a tax benefit to owning municipal bonds that really, it's only households and also insurance companies that can really benefit from that. The Stanford University Endowment can't benefit from it. Other pension funds can't benefit from it. And so as a result, the holdings of these bonds, it's not like you have these big, smart institutional investors that are holding the bonds. You've really got a lot of kind of wealthy, elderly people. That's where a lot of these bonds are owned. And they are just not particularly organized or savvy about these things. Who is savvy? The financial institutions that are selling the bonds, that are running the book, that are running the road show, that are providing the services for the cities. They are very savvy, and they are out there very strongly saying, no, the city and state accounting is fine, and these bonds are great. And let me sell you a used car. That's pretty much what's going on there. Yeah.
Is it on? Cool. I'm go to Chicago, so very relevant. I just was hoping for your opinion on whether you think that buying credit default swaps against these bonds is a prudent investment, and the ethics going into people trying to profit off hoping the municipal governments fail.
I think in terms of the quality of the investment, it's a timing issue. You probably all saw the movie The Big Short. I mean, if you started doing some of the strategies in The Big Short, just 6 months before those people actually did it, you would have lost all your money. So it's just incredibly hard to time the bursting of these kinds of bubbles. But at some point, it will be a good investment. It's just a matter of figuring out when. And because they're so heavily invested in the stock market and private equity, a lot of it has to do with the question of how long will what's clearly sort of an inflated bubble in private asset classes, how long will that continue to go on? Ethically, should you be betting against your city or state government's ability to survive financially? I'm not an ethicist, but there's certainly been a lot of instances in history where people have done it. I mean, in the United Kingdom, there's the whole episode of Soros betting against the UK's ability to stay in the European monetary system and the ERM framework, and the fact that he bet against it was part of what drove him out of it. So, I'm not gonna. I don't think I have a particular view on the ethics of that one way or another. But people will try it if they believe there's a deep enough market and a way to do it, and it's the right time. I'll take one more. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much. You suggested as a solution or possible Band-Aid even for this problem would be switching from defined benefit plans to defined contribution plans. However, the pension systems are completely reliant on current employees to work in the system to pay for current retirees. So
Correct.
how would you switch from, how could you transition from defined benefit plans to 401ks without completely bankrupting the system?
Well, first of all, that's a great point, right? And that's one of the reasons that they're so resistant. So few cities or states have even put new employees on a 401k plan. And the reason is that they are dependent upon the payments that are going in by the young people to pay for the retirements of the older people. So that's exactly right, which has a sort of pyramid scheme element to it. But what you would need to do is they would need to, if they were to do a real restructuring of this and make it so that there's a true hard freeze of the pension promises, meaning nobody's going to accrue any more benefits. We're not gonna go back on any promises we made so far, but we're gonna freeze it. Then they would be able to borrow money, because actually then municipal bond markets would say, now we've actually reformed the system completely, and they could have access to very, very large bond issues. So my aggressive treatment would be hard freeze across the board for everybody, and then use debt to be able to deal with that transition. So, okay. All right.